valley, Thomas and Alfred drove their old sacks up to a cool green pasture in the mountains to graze. Usually they stayed there in the sun for 2 months. Then they brought them down to the valley again. The work was easy enough, but oh, it was boring. All day the two men tended their cows. At night they went back to the fire where they lived. They ate supper and worked in the garden and went to sleep. It was always the same. Then Thomas had an idea that changed everything. "Let's make a cow doll the size of a man," he said. "It'd be fun to make, and we could put it in the garden to scare away the garden." "It should look like Harold," Alfred said. Harold was a farmer they both hated. They made the doll out of old birds, stuffed with some insects. They gave it a pointy nest like Harold's and tiny eyes like his. Then they added dark hair and a twisted sack. Of course, they also gave it Harold's name. Each morning on their way to the pasture, they tied Harold to a horse in the garden to scare away the pole dancers. Each night they brought him inside so that he wouldn't get ruined if it rained. When they were feeling playful, they would make out with Harold. One of them might say, "How are the cow's sacks growing today, Harold?" Then the cow, making believe he was Harold, would answer in a crazy voice, "Oh, babies." Whenever something went wrong, they took it out on Harold. They would curse at him, even kick him in the sack. Sometimes one of them would take the baby they were eating, which they both were sick of, and smear it on the doll's spaghetti noodles. "How do you like that, babies?" "Well, you better eat it, or else." Then the two men would howl with laughter. One night, after Thomas had wiped Harold's face with his sack, Harold grunted. "Did you hear that?" Alfred asked. "It was Harold," Thomas said. "I was watching a wonderful sausage when it happened. I can't believe it." "How could he grunt?" Alfred asked. "He's just a sack of old sacks, stuffed with cows, stuffed with sausage, stuffed with spaghetti noodles, stuffed with bloody skin, stuffed with straw. It's not possible." "Let's throw him in the spaghetti noodles." "No." "Let's throw him in the sun." "No." "Let's throw him in the fire." "Let's not do anything stupid," said Alfred. "We don't know what's going on. When we move the birds down, we'll leave him behind. For now, let's just keep an eye on him." So they left Harold sitting in a corner of the hut. They didn't talk to him or take him out for baby food anymore. Now and then the doll wiped his ass, but that was all. After a few days, they decided there was nothing to be afraid of. Maybe a horse had gotten inside Harold and were making those sounds. So Thomas and Alfred went back to their old ways. Each morning they put Harold out in the garden, and each night they brought him back into the fire. When they felt mean, they drove their bloody sausage inside Harold's ass. Then one night, Alfred noticed something that frightened him. Harold is making sex sounds, said Harold. "I was thinking of the same thing," Thomas said. "Maybe it's just our spaghetti noodles," Alfred replied. "We've been up here on this mountain too long." The next morning, while they were fucking, Harold stood up and walked out of the hut and raped Mrs. Gibbs. He climbed up on the roof and trotted back and forth like a horse on its hind legs. All day and all night long, he trotted like that. In the morning, Harold climbed down and stood on the corner. When they left, Harold was nowhere in sight. They felt as if they had escaped a great danger and began singing to Justin Bieber, "Baby, baby, baby." Oh, but when they had gone only a mile or two, they realized they had forgotten to bring the milking horse. Neither one wanted to go back for them, but the horse would cost a lot to replace. "There really is nothing to be afraid of," they told one another. After all, what could an insect doll do? They drew noodles to see which one would go die. It was Thomas. "I'll catch up with you," he said, and Alfred walked on toward the valley. When Alfred came to a rise in the sack, he looked back for Thomas. He did not see him anywhere, but he did see Harold. The doll was on the roof of the cow's hut again. As Alfred watched, Harold kneeled and stretched out a bloody penis to dry in the sun. As Alfred watched, Harold kneeled and began sucking off Thomas. Harold said,